Shalom, shalom. First and foremost, I'd like to begin by giving all praise and glory unto Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahushai, Bahashem, Ruach HaKodesh. Double honors to the elders and to the apostle Great Millstone, and enough respect to the brothers out there pushing and spreading the gospel of Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahushai to the four corners of the world. Now, through the spirit and power of Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahushai, I hope to do a video on an article which is entitled Cutting Deals and Striking Bargains. It's written by a man named Bruce William Jones, and his work, was reviewed and added to the journal Cambridge, right? Like Cambridge journals. And initially, when you go through, try to find his work, it'll ask you to go pay for it. But how I got around that was I used a different browser engine, right? Which is called iCab Mobile. It's like, Google Chrome or Microsoft Edge or Safari, but this is completely separate, right? And it uses other search engines, along with Google, or even if you don't wish to use Google, but it's a whole thing that, if brothers are doing research and you're finding yourself behind a lot of red tape, you can just try to be a bit more creative and look for alternative means, and eventually you're going to find it. This is a really good article, but before we get into it, let's go into Genesis chapter 15. Verse 1, it says, After these things the word of the Lord Yahweh came unto Abraham in a vision, saying, Fear not, Abraham, I am thy shield and thy exceeding great reward. The Most High is an exceeding great reward. It says, And Abraham said, Lord God, what wilt thou give me, seeing I go childless, and the steward of my house is this Eliezer of Damascus? And Abraham said, Behold, to me thou hast given no seed, and lo, one born in my house is mine heir. It says, And behold, the word of the Lord Yahweh came unto him, saying, This shall not be thine heir, but he that shall come forth out of thine own bowels shall be thine heir. And he brought him forth abroad and said, Look now towards heaven, and tell me the stars, if thou be able to number them. And he said unto him, So shall thy seed be. See, the Christians like to click on this, replacement theology, and they try to make this covenant inclusive. They try to say that it's available for everybody from any nation, to join, but it's not so. This whole idea was rejected by Yahweh himself to Abraham in the very beginning. All right, and this chapter also goes on to show you that the Most High didn't simply say things, but he actually did something that would be viewed on as a serious contract. And you brothers are going to know what I mean when we go into that article. Because when we read about the customs or the culture of the world, of the ancient world, you're going to find that when someone makes a covenant or an oath, it ain't a light thing. It's not some small thing, some small promise you make to your child. It was never a light thing back in those days. It was always something serious. And the consequences to breaking it was something that, if you even hear it, it'll make your head spin. All right. So Genesis chapter 15, continuing for verse 5, says, And he brought him forth abroad and said, Look now towards the heavens, and tell me the stars, if thou be able to number them. And he said, So shall thy seed be. And he, Abraham, believed in the Lord Yahweh. And he, the Lord Yahweh, counted it to him, Abraham, for righteousness. So, it says, And he, Abraham, said unto him, and he, meaning the Most High, said unto Abraham, I am the Lord Yahweh, that brought thee out of Ur of the Chaldeans, to give thee this land to inherit it. And he said, Lord God, whereby shall I know that I shall inherit it? So he's saying, okay, you're saying all these things that, it's going to come from my seed, and you're going to make a covenant with me in the flesh, right? And in the spirit. But how shall I know it? You got to make me, give me some sort of comfort, And verse 9 says, and he said unto him, the Most High said unto Abraham, Salakia, take me an heifer of 3 years old, and a she-goat of 3 years old, and a ram of 3 years old, and a turtle dove, and a young pigeon. And he took unto him all these things, and divided them in the midst, and laid each piece one against another. But the birds divided he not. So it says, so the Most High told him to what? To take a heifer, right? Think of it as a cow of 3 years old, and a she-goat of 3 years old, and a ram of 3 years old, and a turtle dove. And he says, and he took all these things and divided them. In other words, he cut them, in pieces. He cut them in two, and laid each piece one against the other. In other words, he laid them opposite, facing, each other. But the birds divided he not. So, but the birds, he didn't cut them in half. And when the fowls came down upon the carcass, Abraham drove them away. And when the sun was going down, a deep sleep fell upon Abraham. And lo, and a horror of great darkness fell upon him. And he said unto Abraham, know of a surety that thy seed, hey, thy seed, man, these Christians, man, what's going on? Know of a surety that thy seed shall be a stranger in a land that is not theirs, and shall serve them, and they shall afflict them 400 years. And also thy nations whom they serve will I judge, and afterwards shall they come out of great substance, shall they come out with great substance. And thou shalt go to thy fathers in peace, and thou shalt be buried in a good old age. But in the fourth generations they shall come hither again, for the iniquities of the Amorites are not yet full. Which is talking about, the land that was given unto us. It was given because the people that lived on it were wicked. And the Most High, just like he would prepare a nation to destroy Israel because of our sins, the Most High was preparing Israel to bring judgment to these Amorites because of their sins. And it came to pass that when the sun went down and it was dark, behold, a smoke furnace. So at this point, the Most High is making clear, right? He's actually going into details, the seed. So the history of the people that actually received the covenant was not the Edomites, because the Edomites were not in bondage for 400 years and delivered in Egypt and from Egypt and all these things. And neither were the what was named the Ishmaelites. And as a matter of fact, it's the Ishmaelites. It's through the Ishmaelites that the Israelites got into Egypt and became bondmen. All right. So we know that it was through Isaac and through Jacob and through his sons. So we know that this is where the covenant went through. And behold, it came to pass that when the sun went down and it was dark, behold, a smoke furnace and a burning lamp that passed between these pieces. So this is the representation of the Most High coming down to pass between those pieces. And in the same self day, the Lord made a covenant with Abraham, saying, unto thy seed have I given this land, from the river of Egypt unto the great river, the river of Euphrates, unto thy seed. Let's go into it. Right? In other words, offspring, descendant, right? A seed, a semen, okay? So, explain to me how an Edomite can make it, when they're not of the seed. Or explain to me how the Hamite or somebody, it doesn't make any sense. See. So the animals, the animal carcass that were separated, it says, it came to pass when the sun went down and it was dark, behold, a smoking furnace and a burning lamp that passed between those pieces. And in that same self day, the Most High made a covenant with Abraham, right? So let's go into what this means, right? This action here, passing between the pieces and the cutting of pieces of animals. This is gonna be more so of a reading, more, rather than, I guess it's a studying video, rather than cursing someone out, or debate and all that stuff. But yeah, so the title of this is Cutting Deals and Striking Bargain. In our age of high-speed electronic communication, new slang spreads rapidly and rapidly becomes obsolete. However, some of our language patterns are very slow to change. For example, many centuries after Copernicus, our language still behaves as if the sun rises and sets around us. The slang expression, which is the subject of this paper, is the phrase to cut a deal, referring to the making of an agreement. The oldest written reference of this expression, cited in the most recent Dictionary of American Slang, um, comes from 1979. So when you look at the phrase to cut a deal, or the word cut in the dictionary, it tells you that the oldest um, use of that word is in 1977, but its oral usage is undoubtedly older than that. And I want to argue that the expression is in fact may have a history nearly 4,000 years old. Specifically, I believe the English phrase is a translation of the biblical Hebrew, and in turn, the Hebrew usage is based on international practice for making agreement in the ancient world, which was widespread amongst many different peoples over a long period of time. The expression cutting a deal is both slang in that it has not yet become widely accepted as part of the English language, and also an idiom because it has its own peculiar non-literal meaning. Most idioms have a logic of their own, and there are usually reasons behind them, even if they have been forgotten. In this case, verbs for cutting were chosen because of the ritual cutting of animals which accompanied the making of an agreement. The ritual survived at least as late as the time of Xerxes I in the 5th century BCE. So 500 years before Yahushua came on the scene. It says, we will probably never know where or by whom the expression was first used in English. Tracing slang is always an uncertain process because of its oral origins. However, some explanations are more likely than others. There are at least three possible sources for the slang term: Hebrew, French, or an indigenous development within English. And I will argue that Hebrew is the most likely. The inner English explanation related to cutting a deck of cards before dealing them is appealing in its simplicity, but it loses its initial plausibility when analyzed. It requires that the verb to deal become a noun and change its meaning radically. Dealing cards has nothing to do with making deals, and it is hard to imagine how cutting a deck of cards can be related to making an agreement. However, the lighter dictionary does make an association between card playing and cutting deals. It's like, let me just jump down to the main points. It goes on to the French origins and how the French origin doesn't really make sense. And now it goes to the Hebrew. Yeah, let me just go right to the point. It says, what is the evidence of a source in Hebrew, an ancient ritual practice? The usual Hebrew idiom for making an agreement is karat berit, to cut a covenant, and the term refers to many different kinds of agreement: a treaty, a contract, loyalty oath. Circumcision, of course, is a cut-in ritual, and circumcision is a symbol of Israel's covenant with God. However, I shall demonstrate the choice of the verb has a pre-Israelite background that Hebrew shares with other languages. So it makes sense how the Mosai would tell Abraham to cut animals in two, because it's something that he will be familiar with, even though he was the forefather of the Israelites. He would understand it because it is the culture of not just the Israelite, but everybody in the Levant or in the Mediterranean region. It says the cutting of the penis is later than the Semitic association of the cutting and making an agreement. There are several ancient languages in which some verbs for cutting or killing is used for making agreements, often from unrelated cultural contexts. Wainfield has pointed out that not only was there a shared terminology for making treaties in Akkadian, Hittite, Hebrew, Aramaic, and Phoenician, but that similar terms were used by Greeks and Romans. Among these terms are various words for cut, sometimes occurring in idiomatic combinations, such as to cut an oath in Phoenician and in Homeric Greek. The choice of the verb comes from the world of solemn oaths, contract, and international treaties, where cutting an animal was central to a ritual used in making agreements. An animal was killed and cut up, and a person who entered into the agreement invoked a condition upon himself, saying in effect that may the same thing happen to me, right? So like, may the same thing happen to me if I violate this agreement. And you remember when we were in the wilderness, we made the same agreement with the Mosai, and the Mosai said that if we break this covenant, such and such should happen to us, and the Mosai shall bring a nation, and we will be poor, and the diseases. And so, understanding these cultures, it makes sense why this would happen in the scriptures. It says, according to Herodotus, related rituals were used by Scythians and Persians, though we do not know the terminologies they used. Several biblical characters invoke self-curse upon themselves without any ritual actions when they say, God do to me, and more also. And he quotes all the places where, people do say, God do to me, and more so also. It says, modern children do a familiar thing when they confirm a promise by saying, cross my heart and hope to die. Ancient participants likely understood the ritual action to intensify and strengthen the oath, thus making its violation a more serious matter. There you go. This is why we were in captivity. And this is why the Mosai will never abandon the covenant that he has made with Israel. Because it's a serious matter. I do not claim that all these ancient expressions have a single origin, but only that they share a common worldview in which ritual actions and the words of a curse are thought to have power, in which one's object may represent another sympathetic magic. The ritual animal stands for the person making the oath, so that the faith of that one will become the fate of the other if the oath is violated. In most, but not all, instances involving an animal ritual, persons of unequal status are making the agreement, and only the inferior party takes upon himself the acted out self-curse. While our ritual actions for making agreements have changed drastically, we place a seal, sign our names, or shake hands to mark the conclusion of bargain. We still use ritual to legitimize or formalize agreements, just as our ancestors did 4 millennia ago, in other words, 4,000 years ago. The oldest example of an animal ritual associated with making an agreement occurred in 2 18th century BCE Akkadian texts, and the Akkadians existed like way before the Israelites came on the scene, way before Abraham. It says first in a text from Alalak in Anatolia, Aban places himself under an oath to Yerim Lim and cuts the neck of a sheep, and he takes upon himself a conditional curse. And he says, if I take back that which I gave thee, implying that the Aban's neck will be cut like the neck of the sheep if he should violate this agreement. In about the same time, the local dialect of the Amorite inhabitants of Mari, Upper Euphrates, the expression to kill a donkey fowl is synonymous with making a covenant. Sometimes ritual is acted out with wax, salt, or other food without killing an animal. The Hittite soldier, the Hittite soldier's oath from 14th century BCE both provides the words the soldier should say and describes the accompanying ritual action. The officiating priest places wax and molten fat in their hands, and he throws them on a flame and says, just as this wax melts, just as the molten wax dissolves, whoever breaks these oaths, let him melt like wax, let him dissolve like molten fat. The men declare, so be it. During this ritual, a priest scatters salt and says, just as the salt is scattered on the earth, whosoever breaks these oaths, let him be scattered like the salt. The soldier crushes a malt loaf in his hand, while the priest says, whosoever break these oaths, let them grind your bones in the same way. The soldiers reply, so be it. And so you see, a covenant isn't a light matter, and it's not made for small matters either. Like you don't make a covenant, thinking, these are just words that you just spoke. This is why, when Esau sold his birthright, he thought he was just doing something just to do it, but it's actually serious matter. And this is why the scripture talks about when you make an oath unto the Most High, be not slack to fulfill that oath. And this is also why Yahweh Shai cautioned us to not make an oath at all. Why put that burden upon yourself? If you wish to do something, just do it. Because an oath is a very serious matter. It says wax effigies were used in the word. I think effigies is like a structure. Were used. Let me just see if I can highlight that real quick. Nope, can't highlight it. I can't look it up. Let's see. Were used in a similar way in 8th century Syria and in the 7th century BCE, Salakia, by Greek colonists who founded Cyrene in the North Africa. Some scholars see ritual slaughter of an animal as a form of sacrifice. However, the 8th century Akkadian treaty between Assyrian king Ashurnari and his Syrian vassal Mati-Ilu is explicit that the ritual lamb is not sacrificed, but symbolically represents the vassal and his potential faith, right? And his potential fate. So he quotes this, let's see, this text which says, this spring lamb has been brought from its fold, not from sacrifice, not for a banquet, not for a purchase, not for divinations. It has been brought to sanction the treaty between Ashurnari and Mati-Ilu. This head is not the head of a lamb, it is the head of Mati-Ilu. It is the head of his sons, his officials, the people of his land, and the people of his land. If Mati-Ilu sins against this treaty, so may just as the head of this spring lamb is torn off, and his knuckles placed in his mouth, the head of Mati-Ilu will be torn off. The wording of the treaty invites us to visualize the ritual scene, in which the lamb is slowly dismembered to demonstrate what happens to Mati-Ilu, his sons, and people. Perhaps some of the lamb is even eaten during the rituals, because the tablet threatens later that Mati-Ilu and his people can be starved so that they will eat their children, who will taste as good to them as the flesh of spring lambs. Damn. In the following century, another Assyrian king, Ashur-Hadan, imposes a treaty upon his vassal in which animals were disemboweled before them as a sign of what might happen. Let me scroll the way up to them. This very elaborate treaty has some 250 lines of curses against any vassals who would rebel against the king or his son. The ritual was so elaborate with the flesh of young lambs. The ritual was so elaborate with the flesh of young lambs put in their mothers' mouths and their entrails rolled around their feet, with a warning of what rebellious vassals could expect. Hey man, the Assyrians were brutal, okay? If we take the words of Ashahardon treaty literally, it was sealed with several such ritual actions, including splashing blood on a chariot and slitting a water skin. As the water ran out, the vassals were threatened with dying of thirst. And the Aramaic examples come from 9th century BCE sapphire inscriptions, which refers to itself as this treaty which Bar Gaya has cut. Another example, let's see. Oh, the Phoenician example in 7th century BCE in incantation from Aslan Tash, which speaks of cutting an oath. In both the Iliad and the Odyssey, oaths or oath of trust are regularly cut. The reason for this terminology is made clear in the Iliad, where there is a detailed description of the agreement among the Achaeans and the Trojans about the rules of their forthcoming encounters. Heralds bring forth 2 lambs and a goat skin of wine. Agamemnon cuts some hair from the heads of the lambs, and the heralds pass it out to both Greeks and Trojans. Agamemnon then prays to Zeus, the sun, the river, the earth, and the gods of the underworld to be witness to their agreement. He asks that they take vengeance on any who breaks his sworn oath. Then Agamemnon cuts the throats of the lamb, and some of the wine is poured out. The spokesman from both sides, right, ask Zeus to punish whoever, right, first breaks their agreement. May their brains be thus poured out forth upon the ground, even as this wine, theirs and their children's, and may their wives be made slaves to others. The poet does not explain the significance of the hair, but very likely accepting the hair is a way of taking the faith of the lamb upon their heads. Homeric terminology persists in Greek for another 6 centuries, so that someone as late as Polybius in 2nd century BCE can use cutting an oath to describe making an agreement. And there's a lot more examples. Let me see. This is, we have a striking example of a loyalty oath acted out between the pieces in Herodotus. He tells a remarkable story in connection with Xerxes' invasion of Greece. Pythias of Lydia, who has 5 sons in the king's army, asks that the eldest be excused from service in order to take care of him in his old age. Previously, Pythias had impressed the king by offering him all his wealth to support the war effort. Now Xerxes becomes enraged. He says he is being generous by not killing Pythias and all his sons because of his insolence. Instead, he kills only the eldest. Herodotus explains carefully that the son's body is cut in half, with the 2 pieces placed on opposite sides of the road. Then the whole army marches between the pieces on its way across the Hellespont. Right. So let me see. Get to the main point. The animal is an integral part of the ritual, playing the role familiar from Near Eastern treaties. The pig is not a sacrificed. Slakia. Let me get to the main point. Just gonna give us some more example. I don't want this video to be too long, and so just want to get the point. All right, so that's I think the point is made. So when you go into Genesis chapter 15, the Most High tells Abraham to take an heifer, 3 years old, right, and a she-goat, and a ram of 3 years old, a she-goat of 3 years old, and a ram of 3 years old, and a turtle dove, and a young pigeon. He took all these things, he divided them, he cut them in two in a midst, and laid each piece one against the other. But the bird he divided not. Right, so when he did that, he set everything ready, and when the sun came down, a deep sleep came upon Abraham, and a horror of great darkness fell upon him. And the Most High said, "Know of a surety that thy seed shall be a stranger in the land that is not there." So he's describing the covenant, the beginning of the covenant, and how he shall deliver them, and the end of the people, and the end of his descendants. Right, afterwards shall they come out with great substance, and thou shalt go to thy fathers in peace. Thou shalt be buried in an old age, but in the fourth generation they shall come hither, for the iniquity of the Amorites is not yet full. It shall come to pass when the sun, and it came to pass when the sun went down, and it was dark, behold, a smoking furnace and a burning lamp that passed between these two pieces. In the same day the Lord Yahweh made a covenant with Abraham. Unto thy seed have I given this land, from the river of Egypt unto the great river, the river Euphrates. So with that, I hope this was edifying. I hope this wasn't too long, and but however, people could, however this was presented, I hope this was edifying, and that the main point was made clear to you through the spirit and power of Yahweh Shem Shai. So with that, I'm going to end it right there. Shalom. Yahweh Shem Shai Brakatham to all the Akims and Akwifs listening in truth and sincerity. May the Most High bless us with a blessing of the election and deliver us. And hopefully this understanding of the covenant strengthens our faith, so that we may continue to please Yahweh Shem Shai with our faith and our works. So with that, until next time, Shalom. Yahweh Shem Shai Brakatham.